Welcome back, guys, and thank you for listening in once again to the A to Z of Godly Relationships. Today I want to speak to you about languages, which language of love that you speak. Now, most of you will probably automatically think about the 5 love languages, and we're certainly going to touch on that today, but I didn't want to narrow it down to only those, mainly because most of us have had some kind of experience or have done the test and all of that, the 5 love languages. But I wanted to kind of broaden it a bit and look somewhat, include those, most certainly include those, but maybe look a little bit outside of those as well, because some people say there are more than 5. Some people say that they're not accurate or it doesn't work for them. And I will, by all means, share my views on whether I think that's true or whether I found in my experience, that they work or they don't work. But I do want to certainly explore it a bit more. So let's have a look at what language of love you speak as an individual. Now, if you're single listening to this, don't switch off, because you may think, well, it doesn't apply to me because I don't even have somebody to love right now. So why are we even thinking about this? Well, I would say to you, always prepare for where you want to be. I presume, it is an assumption, but I do presume that if you're listening to this podcast, that you do have an interest in this area and that you would, as a single person, like to meet someone to love and to spend the rest of your life with. That is an assumption on my part. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. Feel free to listen on, feel free to switch off, feel free to forward it to someone that you think it might be relevant to. But I really hope that you continue listening, because I certainly found in my time as a single person that time was invaluable in learning what I needed to learn, or at least get onto the path of what I needed to learn to be able to have a marriage. Notice I didn't say a successful marriage, because we're continuously working on it. I can't say, is my marriage a success? Well, to a degree, yes, because we're still married. But is it perfect? Is it blissful? Is it without fault? Is it, no hiccups and no bumps in the road? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Constantly working on it all the time. And so I would like to say, if you are single, do listen on, because you may learn something. And as always, I love being able to reflect on myself, look in the mirror, rather than looking at the other person, whether it be for me, my husband, or whether it be for the person that you want to meet one day. Let's reflect on self first, and then we know what we're putting out, right? First of all, I do want to clarify, but I don't want to patronize you by saying that you do know that love is not just that fuzzy feeling, right? You know, it's not just the flutters in the tummy and the fast beating heart and all of that. That comes into it and it doesn't disappear. Some people will say, oh, that all goes. That all goes. The longer you're in a relationship, the longer you're married, it all goes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't go. But it's intermittent. It's not always there. But it comes and it goes. That's certainly been my experience, and experience of the many, 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 many couples that we've counseled, many individual people who have been in relationships and have come out of them for one reason or another, is that it's not this kind of, gradually increasing feeling that just climbs and climbs and climbs until you're so blissful that you could burst. It's up and down. It's, day by day, hour by hour. And that's good, because it means you're working towards something. It means that no 2 days are the same. Ideally, you'd get to a place where things are increasing and getting better, but doesn't mean that you hit a little bump in the road and it all falls to pieces. So that fuzzy feeling is one part of the whole love aspect. But I would like to talk about the longer term love, the full expanse, the holistic view of what love is. So let's get the love languages listed first of all, so that when I mention certain phrases, it will make sense. And I'm going to come from assuming that you either don't know them or don't know much about them, or have heard them but maybe don't have experience with them. So if you have lots and lots of experience and you know lots and lots about the 5 love languages, bear with me. But I just want to be inclusive to everybody. So we have the 5 love languages that are listed. And they are words of affirmation, in no particular order: words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. Now, some people say there are more. Some people say that, they kind of adapt it slightly, but I'm going to stick with those 5 as they were written by Gary Chapman. I'm going to stick with those. Now, when you look at each one of them and you break them down, in fact, let's break them down. Let's break them down a little bit. Words of affirmation. What is words of affirmation? Well, if you're the kind of person, and bear in mind when we talk about the love languages, that you're talking about how you like to receive love, not how you give love, but how you like to receive it. So someone else offering you these things and how it makes you feel. Yeah. So with words of affirmation would be somebody speaking positivity, speaking encouragement, reminding you or highlighting to you the things that you do well, the person that you are. I love when you do that. You're so good at that. All that kind of thing is the verbal encouragement and edification of another person. And so you may be that kind of person that just needs to hear quite often, that you've done something well, or that you look amazing, or you do, you're great at something, or you make the best cupcakes and all of that kind of thing. And not in a patronizing way, but you just like to verbally hear encouragement. And don't limit your love language just to the person that you're in love with, if you like. You may feel that you get these things from your family, even from colleagues. It doesn't have to always be in a love way. It might just be the thing that makes you fly, that gives you wings. So you may be the kind of person that really lives for your appraisal every 6 months, every year, whatever. Especially if it's a good appraisal, it gives you the power to just go on and do great things. It may be that you have to have lots of followers or lots of people saying how amazing you look or how good you are at something. And for people with this love language, it doesn't always matter where it comes from. As long as you're being encouraged, it makes you feel heightened. It makes you feel full. It makes you feel happy and smiley and joyful, because those words just give you life. They give you strength, So someone speaking positively over you is what makes you feel loved and encouraged. And obviously in a loving relationship, if you have somebody that's constantly telling you how great you are and how great you look and what you do is amazing, that's going to give you that feeling of feeling full of love. Your love tank, is full and overflowing. Looking at acts of service, there are people who feel loved because of what people do for them. It's to assist them, to help them, to, take over the chores, or to help them with their work, or, they're just physically doing things for them to show them that they care, to show them that they love them, and that makes them feel loved. And if you're that kind of person in a married or, loving relationship where you're living alongside somebody, you would probably feel very loved because of what your partner does for you. They do certain things all the time, the bins or the DIY and things like that. They may wash your car for you, and that kind of thing. You might feel that it might not just be the chores, for example. It might be that they do physical things for you. It may be that they, the way that they, help you put your coat on every time, or clear things away for you, or keep things stocked up for you. But it's the physical act of serving you, of helping you and relieving some of the pressure that's around you that makes you feel really loved. Number 3 is receiving gifts. Now, receiving gifts is one that a lot of people think everybody would like, especially women. There's this perception that we love having things bought for us. And it could be diamonds, it could be flowers, it could be cookies. There's this perception, and, when we think of some of the most romantic scenes in the movies, in the media, it's somebody bringing something. They come to the door and they bring flowers, or, so that it's that receiving of gifts that can make you feel very, very loved. And the misconception here is often that it has to be something expensive, like you're buying a person. And in my experience, I found that there's some people who have the love language of receiving gifts and they almost apologize for it, or they feel a little bit embarrassed about it because it feels as if you're being some kind of, you're greedy or you're a gold digger because you just want people to buy things for you all the time. And it's really not that at all. And if any of you listening have that love language, please be relieved of that, because it may not be that you want things to be bought for you because you're a gold digger or because you like people spending money on you. It's just that moment of receiving something where somebody has thought about you in your absence and has purchased something, made something, baked something, and brought it to you and presented it to you. And that moment of receiving that thing makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. Yeah. So don't apologize for that gift, because it can be the smallest thing. It could be, I shared in one of my previous podcasts about a guy that I was dating, and he brought a packet of biscuits, and it wasn't about the biscuits. And that's not my love language, by the way, but it still touched me. It wasn't about the biscuits. It was about the fact that the previous day we had together eaten the biscuits and finished them. And his thought when he came to visit me the next day was, I'm going to bring a packet of biscuits to either replace the ones we'd eaten or so we could share them again. But he thought about it. He didn't just turn up at my door empty-handed and like, right, so what's happening? Do you know what I mean? And that's what touched me more than anything, was the thought behind it. And that's where I think the people with the gifts, the love language of gifts, thrive, is because they love that feeling that somebody thought about them. And when you grow with someone, when you spend time in a long-term relationship with somebody, they will get to know you. Ideally, they'll get to know you more and more. And so the gifts they bring you tend to be more sort of spot on. It's the things that you love. And so they know what type of flowers or what type of gift to get you. And getting you a gift outside of specific occasions, outside of Christmas, outside of birthdays, and all of that, that makes you feel even more loved, because they didn't have to. There wasn't that pressure of, well, it's Valentine's Day, so I have to bring something, or birthday and I have to bring something. They just do it. And the times when my husband has turned up with flowers in the evening, he's come in and he's just given me flowers just because. And my first thought is, oh, that's nice. What was that for? And he says, well, does there have to be a reason? And it really makes me think, wow, you were out coming from work or the gym or wherever you'd been, and you just thought, I want to buy my wife some flowers. That's the bit that gets me, not the actual flowers themselves. It's more about the fact that you thought about it. So you see what I mean? I think I've dwelled on this one long enough. You see what I mean with regards to gifts, but please don't apologize if that's your love language. Another one is quality time. Now, quality time seems to be really, really popular. I think what most people want in a relationship or a friendship is quality time with a person, time that's assigned specifically to you and not distracted by, screens and phones and things like that. It's more about focusing on you and spending the time, allocating the time, taking the time out of busy schedules to say, I want to be with you right now. I'm not concerned about what else is going on in the world, in my family, in my workplace, in the gym. I'm not concerned. I don't care that this series that we're watching is coming on in 5 minutes. Nope. I'm going to put that all aside and I'm going to spend that time with you, doing what we both love to do or what you love to do, or just talking about plans for the future, reliving memories from the past, that kind of thing. That is often what most people, a high percentage of people want, is somebody who focuses on them, and takes that time to spend with them, not just being physically present in the home, but actually being attentive and giving them that quality time that they desire. And then the last one of the 5 love languages is physical touch. Physical touch is one, some people can assign that immediately with sex. Not so. And that of course, that's incorporated. But physical touch is something, for example, I know in my own marriage, I know when my husband is in a good place with me, with regards to his thoughts and feelings towards me on any given day, when he passes by me and touches me on my back, on my arm, anywhere. He'll just rest his hand for a second and then carry on walking. And when he does that, it kind of tells me all is well. And my husband does have a love language of physical touch. Whether it's his primary one or not, we still don't know, because he seems to keep changing. And I'll talk a bit later about whether these things do change. But I definitely, having been married to him for 16 years, I do believe physical touch is one of his, because he will always take my hand if we're walking to somewhere or through somewhere. Like if we arrive at a restaurant and then the waiting staff guide us to our table, he will step forward and he'll automatically put his hand out behind him to take my hand and guide me along to where the table is. He does it all the time without even thinking. And he instinctively, if we're sitting in bed watching a movie, he'll take my hand. So it's not necessarily a sexual touch all the time. It's often just that person is one that reaches out and holds you. He will, if all is well and we're on a drive, he'll reach over and take my hand while we're driving. Now, I won't necessarily do that. I will do that when I'm feeling super duper loved up. Like, oh my gosh, this is just bliss. I love my husband so much. And I'll reach over and take his hand in the car. But he will just do it instinctively, And so I think physical touch is not one to be purely associated with the sexual act. It's more to do with the sort of everyday person who just loves contact. Yeah. So those are the 5 love languages. Which of those is your language? Do you know? I don't know. Some of what I've said may ring true with you, but do try to make the effort to have a think about what you like to receive as opposed to what you like to give out. I say that because in a relationship, more often than not, your love languages will be different. Now, some people think to be in a good, successful relationship, you have to have the same love language as your partner. You really don't. You really don't. But what you do need to do is learn their language. I like to liken it to if one of you was Spanish and the other was, I don't know, Italian or British, but you had 2 different languages and you didn't share a language. So, quite often a Spanish person will also speak English, an Italian person will also speak English. And so you may speak your native language, your first language maybe with your families, but you will speak English to each other. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2 people who speak 2 completely different languages and do not have a language in common, and you don't know each other's languages. Imagine what that relationship would look like. You would do sign language. You can't even write notes because you're writing in your own language, but you might just signal things or sign things or begin to get to know the person well enough to be able to communicate somehow. And then eventually what happens is you begin to learn each other's languages. You start with the phrases, the hello, goodbye, good night, thank you, where's the bathroom type thing. But gradually you will begin to learn each other's languages. That's exactly what love languages is like. But we get away with far more because we share a spoken language. We kind of just get on with it. And we spend often in marriages, long-term relationships, even in friendships, we can spend a long time speaking a different language, but we kind of just bypass it and focus on the stuff we do know, like our spoken language. But with the love languages, if you don't have the same love language, what you instinctively tend to do is offer your partner your own love language. Now, that may not be an issue, it may not be a problem, and in some relationships it might just be that the needs of the other person, your spouse, the person you're in a relationship with, their needs are not being met, but they can survive. They just, and sometimes they find alternatives, ideally not another person, but they may fulfill their need for something by having another interest, for example. But if you can speak your partner's love language to them, can you imagine the growth and the impact that has on your relationship? So going back to the 2 people that speak different verbal languages, imagine if the Italian person came home and began to speak Spanish to his wife, for example. I hope you're still with me here. Imagine the feeling for her when suddenly the person that she loves and is in a relationship with begins to speak her language, begins to, express themselves in a way that is now fully understood, as opposed to guessing games or trying to somehow get it right, sometimes getting it wrong. But if that person begins to speak fluently in their language, there opens up this whole new realm of understanding and communication that far supersedes anything they've had before. That is what it's like when you begin to speak your partner's love language. Now, when you continuously offer them your own language and that language isn't theirs, the frustration can begin to kick in because their needs aren't being met in the way that makes them feel the most loved. Example, if you are somebody whose love language is acts of service, you would love somebody to do stuff for you. But you're in a relationship with someone whose love language is physical touch, and that person doesn't do things for you, but they just want to keep touching you. They want to hold hands. They want to hug you. They want to just stand together against the kitchen worktop and hug and talk about their day. And you can see that the dishes need doing, the hoovering needs doing, the laundry needs folding, and they just want to hold you. Your frustration about what's not happening begins to form a division. They can't understand why you don't want to just hug them and just stand there. You've been apart all day. You've come in. Yeah, there's loads to do, but just give me a hug. Let's just hold each other. Give me a kiss. Let's just, and it begins to form a frustration in the two of you if that is consistently happening. But if you can offer your partner the language and the love that they need, then you start to see the relationship beginning to turn around. You start to see that person feeling loved, and they now begin to offer you more. Ideally, it would be more of your language now. Does this make sense? Are you staying with me? Because I feel like I'm kind of going backwards and forwards, and I can picture it in my head. And I think because I've lived it as well, because my husband and I do not have the same love languages. Now, some would ask, well, do I only have one? Actually, no. Most people have a primary language, and then there might be a secondary one. Some people have a combination of all five. Do the love languages change over time? I want to give you a short answer, but I have to expand on it a little bit so I don't confuse the situation. From my experience, because you can read up on this and it will tell you yes, it will tell you no. From my experience in my own relationship and from counseling so many couples and individuals, what tends to happen is the need for one type of love increases and decreases through the seasons. For example, quite often when I speak to single people, their love language that comes out, if I do a session, for example, with a group of single people, and we do, say, for example, I did one where we actually did the 5 love languages test, which you can get online. You can get that online. If you haven't done it already, it's literally 5, as in the number 5, lovelanguages.com. You go on there and you can do this. It's very quick. It's very straightforward. But if I've done that test with a group of predominantly single people, there was 1 or 2 that had then got married or were in relationships, but predominantly single people. And the top love language that often comes out and did come out in that session is quality time. Because if you imagine as a single person, if you are wanting to be in a relationship, the best thing you can imagine is having someone to spend time with. Companionship, having someone alongside you, having someone to do things with, to share ideas with, to make plans with, to move forward with, to grow with, And so quality time tends to come really, really high in those settings, in those situations. As time goes on and you have that time, you might find there's people who are now screaming for space. They just want, just give me some space. It's too much, But you might find that the quality time love language lowers a bit because they're getting that. Yeah, does that make sense? So it can change and it does adjust. And I think in the seasons that you're in, one love language I heard the other day, someone said there's a 6th love language is space and freedom. Now, when I was having my children, I had my children quite close together praise God, I'm happy for that, and that's what we wanted. But it didn't make it less difficult, because I had like a 1-year-old and a newborn and, you know, that kind of thing. And then I had a third one again, and it was difficult. And I had at one point 3 children, all under school age. And I was juggling all 3 of them at home. My husband was working jobs around the clock, you know, to keep the roof over our head and all that kind of thing. It's really, really difficult. And if you'd asked me what my love language was in that season, I would have said space and freedom, because I felt so bound by motherhood. I felt restricted, and I'm a bit of a free bird. I like to fly. I like to have 2 days that are different and all of that. So at that time, I would have said space and freedom. But when I was single, I probably would have said, you know, quality time, or even physical touch. If you're someone who has quite a high sex drive or libido, or you like the physical act of sex and that kind of thing, you might say that physical touch is something that you want. You know, even if you don't realize that it's not just about that, you probably would answer all your questions led by your yearning and your lust for someone to physically touch. And so I do believe they can change. But I do also believe that your primary love language remains. It does remain. And I think there's times when it feels stronger than others. But I do believe the primary love language remains throughout your time on earth. It's just whether you have really discovered what that is. And I think when you're living in one extreme or another, it can come across as a bit warped, if you like. It's not necessarily accurate, because your circumstances aren't ideal for which to grow those love languages. Yeah? So that answers that question, I think, is whether they change over time. And as I said, if you're with somebody, married with somebody whose love language is different to yours, it's not a problem. It's not a problem as long as you learn their language and offer it. It's not good enough to just do the test, discover what it is, and then carry on as you've always done. Now begin to speak it. Speak the language. Offer that love language to your partner. Now, some of you may be thinking, how do you communicate what your love language is? So, of course, you can just tell your partner what your primary love language is. What if you are in a relationship that's over a period of time, your partner has been told, you've done the test together near the beginning of your relationship or near the beginning of your marriage, you've done the test together, and you're not seeing your love language displayed to you from your partner. How do you then, in those circumstances, communicate what your love language is, and the fact that you don't feel as if you're receiving it from your partner? I mean, there's several ways. Yeah, you could write them down and list them and put it in front of him or her. You could do that. You could try to dictate it and literally reinforce on a daily basis, look, you know my love language, why are you not offering it to me? Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? It's a bit harsh. And if you're married to the kind of person I'm married to, that could increase their resistance. Because to be honest, when someone's coming at you like that, it almost feels like an attack. If someone's coming at you like that, why are you going to want to offer them the love language? You know, because they're attacking you. The last thing you want to do is offer love. You might want to offer quite the opposite, to be honest. So if you are coming at it from a sort of dictatorial aspect, it's probably not going to get you very far. You can drop hints here and there, you know, and that might work for your relationship. You know, I tend to find that if my husband starts researching something, and he's scrolling through and he's looking at different things that he, you know, different versions of what he'd like to receive or that kind of thing. And he might just show me or drop a hint that he's looking at that thing, you know, and it might not be that he wants me to buy it. He's just making me aware that there's probably going to be a bit of a withdrawal coming out of the finances on this thing. And that's his way of kind of beginning the conversation around that thing. So it might be that you use hints to encourage your partner to be more like the person you need them to be with regards to your love language. Quite often it comes across in frustration, though. It comes across in conflict. It becomes accusatory. You don't. You never. Again, when you're on the receiving end of that, you may feel more resistance and less likely to offer that language. It may mean that you hear it in conflict, but you have time to absorb it and then can offer it. it is a big part of this is communicating with your partner how you would like to be reminded of these things, what works and what doesn't work. Accusations, attack, dictatorship may not be your thing. It's probably most people don't want to go down that road. But the soft hints may also not work. My husband made it clear to me a while ago, a couple of years ago. Hinting doesn't work for me. I either completely miss it, or, I think you're just kind of lightly touching on something and then we've moved on. I need you to tell me. I need you to give me examples. I need you to show me in the moment. If it's something you're saying that I do or don't do, in the moment where I've done it or not done it, tell me then. Then at least I can see the evidence. I can see the example. I understand what it is that you're talking about. So I've had to learn to do that with him. But it took us years to get to that place where he could tell me how best to approach that very thing. So it may be the same here. I would say the best way is through encouragement. When I would like to think that your partner gets it right every now and then, once in a while, even once. If they get your love language right once and it makes you feel amazing, dwell on that and encourage them based on that. So I loved it when you did A, B, C, or D. Remind them of when they did it. Remind them of how it made you feel. Remind them that that's something that you would like to continue. That could be the best way. But again, we're all married to different people. Some of us not married at all. And so it's finding your best way to remind the person, but don't ever sit back and assume that they'll get it or they've got it or they'll continue to do it, because what you don't want is to turn around in 20 years' time and say, you were never able to fulfill my need for love, for feeling loved. But is that their fault if they didn't know, or you hadn't told them, or you'd given up on telling them? You may need to remind your partner weekly. Who wants to do that? Most people don't. But if it means that you begin to get, they begin to get it. Remember that this person that you've met has already lived a whole lifetime before they met you. Yeah, a whole lifetime of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 odd years maybe before they met you, doing the very thing that may frustrate you, the very thing that doesn't make you feel loved. To undo that could take a while. Yeah, it could take a while. So if on your first, second, third date, you're looking for your love language in the person and they're not offering it, cut them some slack, because until they really learn what your love language is, they can't necessarily offer it. It's a bit like them saying, I'm going to cook a meal, come over, I'm going to cook for you. And then they serve you foods that you really don't like. You may even be allergic to. You may be a vegetarian or vegan and they didn't discover that. They didn't find out. They didn't ask. And then you're angry with them because they put nuts in the food, or they celery or something that you might be allergic to. But how were they to know? It's your responsibility. If you're being invited to dinner, someone's cooking for you. It's different if you're going to a restaurant, because you can look at the menu and eliminate the things that you can't have or don't like. If someone's offering to cook for you, it is your responsibility to say to them, by the way, I have an allergy to fish. I have an allergy to nuts. I don't like whatever. Without reading off a whole long list that they might just cancel. But it's your responsibility, not theirs. And it's the same in a relationship. It's your responsibility to communicate to the person that you're doing life with what you like and what you don't like in the most loving possible way. But it's not their responsibility. It's yours. And this may shock you and surprise you, but I will reinforce this again. It is your responsibility to communicate to the person that you're with how to love you. It may sound crazy, but how would they know? Unless you want them to love you like somebody on a movie and just keep offering you the wrong kind of love, you need to tell them how to love you, but not really off, as I said, in a list or as a dictator. Yeah, I'm not going to dwell on this point any longer. I think you've got it. You've got what I'm saying here. Now, what can happen if you don't continue? Because you may feel you're in a relationship where the person now gets it and they understand the language and how to love you. But it's something they're having to learn. As I said in my previous point, something they're having to learn as new potentially. Sometimes they could revert back. They might revert back to the way they loved you in the beginning. and you might need to remind them again, or you may need to kind of overly appreciate when they have got it right, so that they learn that this is not me. I'll give you an example. There's a couple that we were counseling, and they had lots and lots of different kinds of issues. But one thing, it was just like a pile up of different things. And as we dug deeper and deeper and deeper, we were getting to the root of the issue. But one of the problems was one of them would always buy the other one gifts. They would always come home with gifts. The person who was supposed to be receiving the gifts didn't receive them in the way that it was intended, because the buying of gifts for that person reminded them of an absent person in their life in the past who would disappear for ages and then always come back with a gift as if to make up for all the time that had passed. So that person began to resent gifts. What it represented for them was something negative. So now the person who is in a relationship with them and is trying to show them love is constantly pouring out the very thing that causes them pain. The pain of remembering the past and then what the gifts represented. But they hadn't communicated it. And so the very thing that they were trying to do, one was trying to do for the other, was actually causing more pain than love. So I'm trying to explain that when we revert back, we do what we think is right. A lot of men, for example, will assume, and possibly rightly so, assume that all women love to be brought flowers. I'm not one of those women. I'm not somebody that wants to receive flowers all the time. If I receive flowers, I am so touched and I appreciate them. But it's not my primary language. It's not something that I like to receive. And the thing is with me, I'm quite sentimental, and I attach moments and occasions and locations to the things that I have. It could just be clothing or shoes. I remember the occasion I bought those shoes for, or whatever. That's me. I attach a story or something, an occasion with each item. The problem with flowers is that they die. So I can't keep them. I'm not a hoarder, but I like things that remind me of things. But the flowers will die off, And so whilst they're beautiful and they're pretty, I will often sometimes, especially in summer and spring, I will buy flowers myself to put in my home because I like the look of them in a certain location, for example. But, it's not my primary love language. Gifts really isn't. And so buying me things is not something that's going to speak to me. It's not going to make me think, I feel really loved right now. Having said that, if someone does buy me something, the thought, the realization that they thought of me to then buy me something is what touches me more. Yeah? So I'm not going to reject it. I won't be offended by it, but it's not my primary love language. Okay. So do people revert back to their own love language, loving you the way they want to be loved? Absolutely. Absolutely. It happens all the time. It either happens and continues on because it's never been changed. So if I love you in the way I like to be loved, I just keep offering you that type of love. And if you don't change that, you don't correct me, you don't show me a different way, I will just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And I won't be having the desired impact, but I don't know any different. So I'll just keep doing it. If you then teach me your love language and show me how I can love you better by speaking your actual love language, what then happens is I will do it and do it for a while, but then I might revert back to my love language. And then I need to be reminded, you see, because it's just something that's always been ingrained. For example, the buying of the flowers, you do that. It's ingrained. And so you may revert back to that and then be reminded, actually, that's not the person that I'm with. That's not their love language, And the thing is, with most of these love languages, it won't cause offense. If acts of service is not your love language, but somebody decides to tidy up the whole house and build you a new garden shed, you're not going to be offended by that. You're not going to be offended, but it may not speak to you in the way that your love language speaks to you. Yeah. Just out of interest, I did a little bit of research on which are the most popular love languages and which is the least popular. Interestingly, there isn't a big jump between the most popular and the least popular. They're all very, very, very close. But the most popular seems to be quality time and words of affirmation. Yeah, people like to have someone allocate specific time to them, and they like to hear, well done, you're great, you're amazing at that, you cook the best, sausage casserole. People seem to like those things. The least popular actually is gifts. Some people will be relieved by that because they're spending money that they don't necessarily need to. But having said that, there's literally a very small percentage between each of them. It's actually, I think, across the board, quite well balanced. We live in a world where there's such a broad range and type of person that there isn't anyone. We're not in a world full of people that like words of affirmation. And I've been on, even recently, I was on a live with somebody, and I could see the posts that were coming through. People were posting on there, and they were saying that words of affirmation, don't need it. And sometimes it's because they already feel like, I know I'm fabulous. I don't need you to tell me. I already know this. I've learned that for myself. And it might just be that are you the kind of person that if someone compliments you, it just makes you curl up in a ball because you feel a little bit embarrassed and a bit bashful, a bit vulnerable? Some people don't like words of affirmation because it just makes them feel a bit on the spot. And personally, I love words of affirmation. You couldn't tell me enough if I've done something well. But there's a way as well. There's a way of doing it. I'm not that person who wants to be married to somebody who looks in my eyes deeply and touches me on the chin and then just tells me how beautiful I am. That's not for me. I love watching it in a movie, but it's not for me. It makes me uncomfortable, and thankfully I'm not married to someone who does that. And so, someone who stares at you all the time and just watches you come from the bathroom and just watches you walk across the room or watches you get dressed. And, no, that isn't for me at all. But for other people, they would feel so adored and loved. And that person's being so attentive to them that would work for them. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think with the most popular and most least, I don't think there's much in it. And as I said earlier, if your love language is receiving gifts or physical touch, those are the two that I find people almost lower their voice a little bit when they say what it is. Just a few, not many, but just a few will sort of almost like they're apologizing for it. Please don't. If that's your love language, wear it loud and proud, communicate it, and appreciate it when people do those things that really, really speak into that area for you. As I said, people have more than one love language generally. So if you discover what your love language is, please don't narrow yourself. Don't narrow yourself by only feeling that you can either meet someone who offers you that, or that you can't get along with someone who maybe has a different love language or offers you a different love language. Don't limit yourself in that way, because you may find, as I said, that your love language changes over time, or that you are able to embrace all five or 3 out of the 5. Don't let that be a label for you. Please don't go on dates and ask people what their love language is, and if it doesn't work for you, then you're off. You don't even stay for the starter. Please don't operate like that, because it might just be, again, that we just need to learn a new way. We've all sort of grown into adults operating in one particular way. So if you now have to learn a new way to operate, let that be exciting. Let that be a new adventure. Let that be a way of, how can I meet that need in this person? By all means, take it into account if it means so much to you, but don't let it chase you away from a potential relationship or a relationship that you're already in. By all means, make every effort to teach the person that you're with what it means or what it looks like to love you. Yeah. I think that probably covers the love languages, most definitely. With regards to the language of love, have you stopped to think and discover what your language of love is? And I'm flipping it. I'm not saying love language anymore, because people assume, and I mean, rightly so, that when you say love languages, they think of those 5 that we've just discussed. But now I'm going to flip it and call it the language of love. And I guess what I'm asking now is, for you personally, what is your language of love? What really does it for you? What doesn't do it for you? What turns you on? What turns you off? Discover this for yourself first. Don't wait to let somebody else impose that upon you and tell you how you should be loved. By all means, if you have no clue whatsoever, then use it as a learning exercise, even around your friends. I know there's one friend I have, if I go to her house, which is not necessarily often, but if I ever go to her house, I will absolutely every time always bring her flowers because she loves them. The fuss that she makes when I give her flowers is amazing. And I love it because for me, my love language is words of affirmation. So the way that she responds to the flowers and thanks me and thanks me and thanks me, and then she immediately goes and puts them into a vase and displays them. And then throughout the evening, she'll talk about them over and over again. For me, she's speaking my love language by affirming what I have done. And I'm speaking her love language by giving her that gift that I know she loves. And so even in your friendships, your non-romantic relationships, your love language will evolve out of that. You will begin to see the things that you really love, coming through. And so you don't have to wait until you're in a relationship to discover what your love language is, because you love people that you're not in romantic relationships with, don't you? You love your family. Well, I'm assuming maybe you don't. You have friendships, you have people in your life, you have your own children, for example. And these love language tests, they have them for everyone. For couples, singles, kids, teenagers. You can discover your children's love language through these tests. They have specially adapted ones that you can do to discover what your children's love language is. And that's important because I have 3 boys and they're all so different. And I have to speak to them or purchase things for them or handle them, if you like, with the physical touch differently according to which child I'm dealing with right now. And, my elder son will always, and he's a teenager, he will always greet me with a big hug when I walk in the door. And he comes, if I've been gone for a whole day or more, he will run into my arms like he's missed me, like I haven't been around for 6 months. Whereas another one of my children will sort of come and hug me, but quickly pull back and then sort of stand expectant, like, what you bring me? They're all about gifts. That one is all about the gifts, and then there's others who they just want to talk to me now, talk about what's gone on and what's happened and whilst I've been away and all that kind of thing. They're so different. So it's a really good exercise to practice your love language, giving your love language and also receiving it from the people you already have around you. So get your guide, by all means. If you want to do the test, do that. Get your guide from that, and it might give you a little indication of where you're at the moment. And it may be that's it for the rest of your life. You may remain the same. But definitely think about even going back. How does, when people buy you gifts, how does it make you feel? When people do things for you, how does it make you feel? When people speak certain things or say how great you were at something, how does it make you feel? Someone offering you time. I know that in my friendships, I have certain friends who really want to just spend time with me. They want, let's go for dinner. Let's do something together. That's what they want. They want my time. They don't want me to send them a gift in the post. They want my time, and then there's others that will do things for me. We've had people help us out with our children, for example, and each one of them would be different in what they offer, in that some would do a fantastic job with the children themselves, but we might get back and every single toy that the child has played with is still in the position that the child left it. Then there's be other people who would completely tidy up the whole house, wash up, dry up, all the rest of it, and present us with that as a holistic package of not just looking after children but tidying up as well. We've not asked them to do that, but that's what they've offered us as an act of love, as an act of helping us out when we were in a sticky situation and needed some help with childcare. They give us the holistic version of doing everything that needed doing. Do we appreciate that person more than the person who would just leave everything? Not necessarily, but we recognize that their language is different. Does that make sense? So it doesn't make them better or worse. They're just different. you see. And then you build an expectation. So I know for one person, we'd probably get home and have nothing to do. With another person, we'd get home and we would need to tidy up. But that's not a problem because it's our home. And they've done us a huge favor by looking after the children for us. We don't expect anything more. So it's a bonus if it comes, great. But we don't expect anything more. So, and that's for me an example of take it away from the kind of love aspect. Look at the people and the situations you have in your own life and begin to ask yourself, what is my language of love? What can I do for others? What can people do for me that makes me feel loved? And then you can build an even more holistic picture of what a future relationship can look like if that person offers you that thing. Yeah? So I think we've covered it. I think we've covered what your language of love may be, how you communicate. We've gone over that as well. How you communicate non-verbally, we haven't necessarily touched on, but that's kind of more around if someone offers you a love language that isn't yours and it irritates you, frustrates you, makes you angry, makes you feel unloved, how do you respond? Even non-verbally. So do you go into a sulk? Is your face set in stone? Do you just accept it anyway, but kind of hope they won't do it again? Do you end the relationship because they're just not getting it? How do you communicate that? And how do you respond to that? So it's another form of language. It's like a body language, isn't it? And there's the psychological language, which is just way too deep to get into. But, the emotional language, there's so many different aspects to it. It's not just a case of knowing the 5 love languages or 6, as some people say, or some are saying that, maybe now it's 4. I don't know. But it's not just about knowing those, it's about widening that and really understanding who you are so you know what you can offer. You can be more informed about you so that you can then inform another person about you. So you can save years of battling this out, working it through, getting it wrong by already knowing to a degree how you like to be loved and then being able to communicate that. And as I said at the beginning, if you absolutely do not know, or even better, if you're open to discovering new ways or finding out whilst you're in a relationship, great that you're open like that. But if knowing already will save you some time and some conflict and some frustration, find out in advance so that you can then communicate it to the person that you're beginning to share life with. Yeah, but by all means, give yourself time, give the other person time, learn it. I mean, the most exciting part is discovering it, learning it, which is why I always say when you date, when you begin dating or you continue dating or when you're dating your husband or wife, don't just keep doing the same thing. Don't eat the same foods. Don't go for the same walks. Don't always sit in the car driving with the music pumping so loud that you couldn't have a conversation even if you wanted to. Do different things because that's where all of these languages, these love languages will come out and you'll begin to see the parts that you love, the parts that are acceptable, the parts that are not acceptable and the parts you really just absolutely despise. I don't think anybody despises any of the languages, but there may be, if you're somebody who is big on physical touch, for example, and your partner has come over and you're watching a movie together and you're just stroking, touching, holding hands, fiddling with their fingers, fiddling with their ears, all that kind of thing. You can become an irritant to that person if that's not their love language. You may like it, and what we do is we offer it so that almost as a hint. So if we like to be touched and that person isn't touching you, you begin to touch them to kind of hope that they'll reciprocate that and touch you back. But actually all you're doing is irritating them. Does that make sense? And so that's not necessarily the way to teach them the language. It's by doing it to them. It's to say, this is what I like, but don't necessarily do it to them because it could irritate them. Yeah. And so there may be people who are very precious about how their housework is done. So if you're trying to do acts of service for somebody who is like OCD about their cleanliness in their home, you could irritate them and frustrate them. As I said with the words of affirmation, if you're someone who likes words of affirmation and you keep pouring out all these affirmations on the other person, you can irritate them because they're like, first of all, I don't need it. Secondly, I'll stop talking. is your mouth not tired? Do you know what I mean? And so you can actually have the adverse effect if you are offering a love language to somebody who really doesn't like it or doesn't require it. Yeah, so I'm going to leave you with that. Do a bit of searching for yourself. Do your research. Do the test if you haven't already done it. If you have done it a while ago, maybe do it again and see if it's changed. But definitely discover who you are. I always say this: discover who you are first before you can offer yourself to somebody else. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Fantastic, as always, sharing with you, and look forward to sharing something else next week. As I always say, if you have anything that you really want me to share, whatever platform you're listening on, you can communicate with me. You can leave feedback. You can come to me directly. You can reach me on Instagram, for example, Sonia Harris 71, or relationships A2Z, ATOZ. You can reach me on those. You can DM me. You can get hold of me one way or another. So I'll leave it for there. Have a great week, as always, in this difficult time. Stay safe. Enjoy Christmas if that's your thing. Get prepared, and I'll catch you next time.